Welcome everyone to this session. I'm pleased to introduce the presenter for this session, Megan Miller. Megan serves as liberal arts faculty and instructional designer at Nebraska Indian Community College. From being a child going to work with her father, then the college's math and science division head, to taking college transfer courses, to working in the library, student services, and academics. Her relationship with the college has been lifelong. She is most excited about connections with faculty, professional development, and culturally responsive teaching. Today, she will talk with us about Nebraska Indian Community College's Faculty Reflection Series. Welcome, Megan.
All right. Pidamayaye, Haumatakiapi, Chante Washte Yuhanapi Chiuzapie, Megan Miller, Imakiapika, Ina Marsha Miller, Ichiapi, Henry Miller, Ichiapi, Ate Henry Miller, Ichiapi. Thank you very much for being here and for sitting in on this session. I'm excited to get to connect with you guys over faculty professional development because I'm a very big nerd like that, and I'm sure my NICC group can vouch for that. I get really excited about that in spreadsheets. So this will be great. But I'm very excited that you're all here. And for those of you who don't know me, a big thank you to Mike for giving me a welcome. But a little bit about me, I am from Niobrara, Nebraska, the Northeast Nebraska area, right along the Missouri. Some of my titles are daughter, sister, friend, auntie, and dog mom. Love my fur babies. Also coworker. I really love the work I do at NICC. It definitely feels like a family, and it's a very, very special place. As well as foodie, traveler. That was a big one. We went to Owamni last night. Shout out if you guys are looking for a recommendation. And also nature lover, educator, and learner. So those are some of my titles, and you guys will be able to see some of the connections there. Okay, so since we are all faculty, right, we have our objectives. And so by the end of this presentation, you should be able to explore ideas for course evaluation that can be personalized to your TCU. A lot of times those things don't go together, right? We think of evaluation and we think of TCU, and it's almost like external and internal, right? So we're going to take a look at that. We're also going to gain insights to connect course evaluations to faculty PD opportunities. And then also I'd like for you guys to brainstorm ideas to create faculty community connection and leadership. If you are similar to our TCU, often you may be the one person in your department, and it kind of feels like you're on an island by yourself, right? So we're going to try to have opportunities to learn from each other. So just take note of that. Okay. So how does this factor into our NICC story? So here you're going to see kind of a lengthy timeline, but basically there's a little story that goes behind this, okay? We have had a history of working with Canvas and whatnot since about 2016. Before that, we were doing our classes virtual teleconferencing. We have 3 different campuses, and they are all spread out at least between 30 to 60 miles. And our students often, right, we would have one at each campus and the instructor would be in one place. Y'all may have a very similar dynamic, especially if you're in rural communities. So when we were implementing Canvas, we had some early adopters, we had some later folks, right? And we wanted to be on top of this. And thanks to our academic dean, we kind of started off the gate in a strong way. We decided also that folks really wanted to teach online. And if you have taught online, some people may say to you that this is less work. It's so easy to teach online, okay? Those of you who teach online, or if you've been a student online, also may know it is not easy to teach well online, right? It requires very specific skills. And so we created an in-house credential on online teaching, which also, just a little pitch, we have 2 levels offered in the summer, so come see us. And then also, right, we created a faculty professional development in that sphere, okay? Since then, we've had an instructional design team and whatnot, and so we have all of this awesome stuff going on at NICC. We should be rocking this online education. We should be having all these faculty that can teach whatever, and students are thriving. And we should also be seeing our students, right, graduating. Retention is super high. what we found is that despite all of this early adoption, there's still barriers, right? Folks are still learning. So from our course evaluations, and this is just from 2002, right? So kind of around right after the COVID piece, we were seeing 3 areas in our course evaluations that our faculty were struggling with a bit, right? Or areas of growth, depending how you want to frame it. So the first one was technology skills. And I will say that's improved since then. No surprise there. Out of this room, if you would have said about 5 years ago, how many of you would have been like, oh, I believe I would have been teaching online? Anybody? Okay, how many of you are shocked that you are using as much technology as you're using right now? Anybody? I see one. Okay, how many of you are like, I teach the exact same as I did 5 years ago? Anybody? Okay, okay. So no surprise with the technology skills. The second was student engagement and interaction. And I was like, that's really weird because that's like kind of the 101, right? But what we were finding is a lot of instructors had a little bit more old school where they would be talking and like lecturing to the students, and the students wouldn't have a ton of response back, right? So that also indicated a little bit that maybe we needed some refresher on educational pedagogy. And then the third was about connecting culture in the curriculum. And this was a lower area we had, which also makes sense because we do not have a majority of Native instructors, okay, always working on improving that. But these 3 themes were coming up kind of each semester, and we were having different folks surveyed. So we're kind of at this idea of like, what is going on, especially with all this PD? So what we were thinking about is kind of this idea that there are multiple pressures going on, right? We may be experiencing pressures from higher education or from accreditation or from, right, like recommendations for best practices. You may have experienced pressures to expand your teaching, expanding your course loads, right? Which classes you can teach, kind of those things. And then we also had internal pressures about fitting into our NICC community, maintaining our TCU identity. And we also have 2 chartering tribes, right? So that's an extra layer of complexity and also strength too. Okay, so our instructional design team, which is myself, and shout out to Chrissy Lesher. She is my former ID co-worker, now our Dean of Enrollment Management. We decided we wanted to take a look at how we could kind of bridge those 2 things and create some type of tool that would help us improve in those areas, right? So we started thinking about these tools because when you use items like a quality checklist, sometimes it can kind of feel like you're taking a test and it feels very punitive, right? I don't know about you all, but if you've ever taken one of those longer rubrics, sometimes I feel like I am failing as a teacher because I'm not doing everything perfect, right? When in reality, there are opportunities to grow and maybe they could be framed a little different. So we thought about, what if we made our own? What if it could strengthen our educational foundations? What if it was more reflective than evaluative? What if it focused on people's strengths? Or what if it could strengthen our educational foundation? Because most folks, right, it's their area of expertise is what they've had training on, not teaching itself. Okay, what if we could learn best practices from Indigenous educators? What if people could focus on their growths, connect with cultural connection, emphasize areas most important to us? And especially, what if it wasn't a pass or fail option? What if you didn't feel like a failure at the end because you didn't get everything right? And then also, what if it was a tool that we could help people work together? So all of these things we collaborated on, and we did a lot of research. We looked into what other colleges were doing. We looked into higher education best practices. We connect with our faculty senate. We connected with folks all over the college, right? We had some additional questions about cultural considerations, and we ended up creating a tool where folks could self-reflect. So I would like you guys to do this right now, okay? If you'd like to. You can take out your phone, you can take out a piece of paper, and I'd like you to just put a 1 next to each one that you feel, or not a 1, excuse me. Okay, I'm gonna read a statement, and then you'll put a 1 if you're not doing it yet, a 2 if you're doing it rarely, a 3 if you're doing it often, and a 4 if you're doing it almost always. So the first item says, Students have opportunities to engage with one another to form a learning community. Students can collaborate by both leading and acting as members of groups on projects. So whatever class that you are teaching that you want to focus on, right, that one class, answer that question between not yet, rarely, often, and almost always, 1 to 4. 4 almost always, 1 not yet. 2, students' diverse learning styles are recognized and met using a variety of diverse materials, varying types of assessments and methods of instruction, and tied to the course objectives. So are you doing this not yet, rarely, often, or almost always? Okay, the item in blue. Learning considerations and strategies ensuring accessibility and usability for all learners are intentionally embedded in your course and explained. Not yet to almost always. And I do apologize because we're going through this a little quickly. Students requiring accommodations, for the orange one, have their needs met. For questions on this legal requirement, contact our educational access team. So of course, got to have that little pitch in there. And then in red, intergenerational knowledge is shared in the course. Students are able to make connections between themselves and past, future, present generations. And then finally, students learn from viewpoints and identities that may differ from their own. Diverse identities and perspectives are met with consideration and respect. Statements of respect, course norms, and expectations in class and online are explicitly discussed and written in the syllabus. And once again, 1 to 4. So when you have your results, okay, you should see the numbers to the side. You may have one that has the highest number, okay? So what we did is we asked 4 questions in each of those different colored areas. And we had people tabulate their scores. So in those different colored connections, those different colors, right? That's how folks can see what their scores are in each area. So in the sample one included, someone's highest was the gold color, which is in community, focuses on the togetherness of the class and beyond. So their highest area is in community, their lowest you'll see is an assessment at 12, okay? We decided that this was all going to be self-reflective. I wasn't going to look at anybody's class, Chrissy wasn't going to look at anybody's class, but you would be doing it to your own class. And you would be thinking about your areas of growth and your areas of leadership, okay? You could compare this each semester if you wanted to see how you've grown. And then also, we're going to talk about our scores, our results, but not that you're reporting your score. Instead, I would ask someone, hey, what was your top area? Okay, does anyone want to share theirs if they have one that they got really good scores in? Anybody, what's your high area? Just shout it out. I'm not going to ask you for the number. Zeke, what's your high area? Yeah, I know, that's why I asked. Yeah, so Zeke's top area is content, right? Okay, VG, I'm gonna pick on you. VG's highest area is accessibility, is that right? Okay, so we decided that each person was just going to be able to share what their top area was. And then they're also self-aware of what their area of growth is, right? So if Zeke's lowest area is accessibility, he's gonna be looking out, seeing, hey, VG, would you be willing to help me with this? And everyone should be aware of each other's strengths. Okay, so at NICC, this is what our breakdown was, is we have most folks are a little higher in accessibility, organization. We can see content and community are similar and cultural connection is a little smaller, which makes sense because that was one of our areas of growth, right? And you'll also notice there is an area called assessment and it's not on here. So that's also an area we need to grow in at NICC. But this information is shared across our TCU, so we all have a good idea of what everybody's strengths are, right? And the scores, those are personal to you because they're based on your own self-reflection. And then your area of growth, you don't have to share that out if you don't want to, right? Because we also know sometimes it's a little hard to take critiques, so we're viewing it in a growth way. All right, so we decided we have this tool. We've had people complete it. We're seeing people feeling a little more confident and reflecting on their courses, right? So we said, what if we do a series on each area? So these areas are what what we grouped out as the most important based on interviewing faculty when we're collecting all that data originally. And in those 6 areas, we decided to do 1 session per month where we get together for about an hour and a half. We talk about this subject. And our first go round, we focused a lot on educational foundations, because things like making sure your students are interacting in the class may not be like, may not come second nature for everybody. They may not have that background, or they may not have been taught in that way, right? So we decided to do a series on this. And so you guys will kind of see the roadmap we have. I understand the font's a little small. This is just the dates we did on the last round, but our introduction and then our wrap up are in the black sections. So our current goal is the first 3, all in the fall, second 3, all in the spring. Okay. So a sample format we have is we did our first reflection series, and we connected, I think, in person on the first one, but they've been virtual for the most part now because of our campus locations, where our format's very similar each time. We talk about defining the topic and we do some type of intro activity. We talk about examples of community in that reflection. So those 4 items that are, how often are you doing this in your class, right? We also talk about our leaders in community and ask for their feedback, ask for their insights. And then in this last one, we also talked about intersectionality and belonging, because belonging is such a huge part of community. And if you attended yesterday's session where they talked about SEL skills, you can see that reiterated there too. We also talk about teaching techniques, very specifically, what can you do to strengthen community? And then we also do practice activities or an exchange ideas and resources. If you would like to know what that looks like in an abridged format, you can scan that QR code for, I think, a 5 to 7 minute YouTube video, because we do provide recaps after. Okay. Following, we also have a resource repository for each area in Canvas in our faculty group. So you'll see each of the sections have resources. For example, the community resources. Okay, this is what it looks like after the sections are done. Is we have our areas about courses that have a strong sense of community, have these criteria, one of which we just talked about when we were doing our little evaluation, self-eval. We have our faculty leaders in community. We have quotes. We have our teaching techniques. And so all of this we do real time virtually, right? But then we also have resources where folks can reference back to, such as the Pulling Together Guide for curriculum developers and also for instructors. Highly recommend also for your fellow faculty members. And this is a guide for indigenizing post-secondary institutions. We also talk about intersectionality and power and privilege in every single section. And we also talk about learning brain, survival brain for meeting community. Okay, you'll also see that there's PDFs here. So the presentations folks can access later, as well as video highlights. Okay, and then you can access additional resources. Okay, so we have one of those for each of these sections. And of course, it's taken a little while to build. All right, how we took our data is at the end of the first series, right, learning a little bit more in hindsight, we asked the group about their overall experiences after our first session where we went all the way through. And I think we did them all in 1 semester, just to kind of get our feet wet, take notes on what we needed to do. And then after the second session, we asked 3 questions. We say, which workshop did you attend? And then we say, how do you feel more confident in this series? And then is there any feedback you want to give? And then at the very end of the series, which happened on Friday for this last one, we asked folks about implementation. And so here's some of the highlights. Okay, data on faculty community, and this is just from Friday. So what we found is we asked the group who had all attended is, has this series helped improve your sense of connection or community with your fellow faculty members? And we found that 71% said yes. Okay, 14% said somewhat, like a little bit. And then we had 14% say neutral, okay, stayed about the same. And then one of the folks said this quote that I thought was really nice. They said, I have a better sense of my colleagues, what courses they teach, what successes and improvements they're making, and how to better incorporate cultural connections into my curriculum. And so that was definitely a win. There's some other ones that kind of echo this. I just want to highlight just little pieces for you guys today. Okay. Our reflection series on community, we asked about as well. So only folks that attended were able to complete this. And what they said is, I said, do you guys have a better idea of how to improve community in your courses? 86% said yes. Okay. Meanwhile, there was 14% that said somewhat, so a little bit. This picture definitely reflects community at our TCU for our last faculty gathering. And there's some good stories with that. But one of the quotes that was shared was, the community we formed in this session was a great model of how we can do the same in our classes. Listening and allowing everyone to share or not, this was time well spent. And so what we also had kind of found, anecdotally for me, is that a lot of our faculty members would come to these sessions to connect and learn instead of being on our islands, right? So that was a really big highlight. Okay. In our organization session, we had about 33% said, yes, they felt more confident implementing, somewhat, and then neutral. And then also folks said that they had improved consistencies in their Canvas, structures and functions, and increased effective use of space and time. Okay, cultural connections was also very interesting. Also something to point out with this is we share best practices. So for myself as a non-native person, my goal is to not teach anyone how to learn about their culture, right? Instead, we share resources and we ask folks to contribute and collaborate. We did have somebody say, I learned a lot about cultural connections and how to incorporate them into my courses. And those have been baby steps, and they've been a lot of mentorship and connecting with resources, right? And so you can see in the dynamics here that about half said that they improved, 25% said neutral, and 25% said somewhat for a little bit. And then in content, we have 86% said that they have a better idea of how to improve things in their course. Okay, and this was Zeke's area, right? So they said they have a passion for each educator's disciplines can be contagious to the student's desire to immerse themselves in that material. And I want to do that same sense in my classroom. So even seeing the passion that other instructors have. It's also important to note that folks who had this as their area of strength at our TCU were across the board. There was math and science, there's education, there's folks in, I'm trying to think of all the disciplines, like human services, people in very different groups. And so being strong in content does not mean one specific area. Okay, accessibility, 75% said that they, yes, very much have improved their sense of accessibility, have a better idea of how to. And then someone said here, many of the ideas I often thought of doing but didn't were actually discussed and being used. It was a good confirmation and helping me feel more confident that I'm going in the right direction. So sometimes it wasn't just brand new information. It could also be folks feeling like, hey, I'm on the right path, because you don't always hear that. A lot of times it's the areas of growth, right? And then in assessment, 64% said they improved it, or they had a better idea of how to improve it. 27% somewhat, 9% neutral. And here they said I have a better idea of how to work with quizzes, reflection papers, and discussions, all of which I use for grading. It's a better overall assessment of student capabilities compared to just quizzes and regular assignments, was what they had said. So our next step for this, after doing 2 rounds of series reflections, is I need to dissect this data a little bit more, right? Because since Friday, there's been a lot going on for all of us, right? But our next step is we want to focus on these 6 areas. And I also want to point out that cultural connection is one of those 6, right? There is also discussion about, shouldn't this be embedded in all of them? And absolutely, it definitely should. We decided to keep it a separate area though, because it was one of the areas we were scoring lower in our course observations. So eventually, right, we want to make sure it's implemented across. But in those 6 areas, we would like to implement them into course observations. So that way, when folks have their course observed, they get feedback about, well, hey, maybe I want to go to this reflection series, or here's some resources to get me started in the right place. We also have implemented it into quality checks. And so these we have used for test out options for folks who want to gain skills to teach online. And these areas, right, are the themes, but it's not the subjective tool the same way here. So this reflection series is very subjective. The next series we're going to do is we'd like to have workshopping sessions where people bring in an assignment and we work on it. And we have the experts in the field give us ideas, as well as having faculty lead discussions. And then we're also focusing more on community at our faculty gatherings each year. Often for many of us, it's our first time getting together all in person amongst the 3 campuses, as well as some remote work. Okay. So wrapping up the end of this presentation, I hope you guys got some ideas for course evaluations that can be used to personalize your TCU. I do have the tool as well if you would like to see a copy of it, and you can personalize it to your own TCU. Also, I'm hoping you gained some insights on how to connect course evaluations to faculty PD opportunities. And that's something we're working to continue as well. And then also brainstorming ideas to create faculty community connection and leadership, right? Especially this idea of, as we start every session, we say we are all learners, we're all educators, and we're all learners. So that cycle does not end, right? Okay, and that is the end here. Pidamaya, Wibaha, and also we do have a sign-in sheet over at the NICC table here if you would like any additional information sent to you. I have the reflection document as well as samples of how we've done the resources and whatnot. So thank you.
We've got about 10 to 12 minutes open for questions, or if you just have something you want to contribute to the discussion. So I'll bring the microphone around.
So my faculty is very split up and siloed and sometimes even toxic to one another. Departments don't like one department and the other ones don't like the other ones. I really, really like this. Is this something that you can or would be able to do for another TCU as a program offering, like for, like if you came to Haskell and implement this kind of this program?
A good question. I would say like I would be open to that individually to support that. But I also think that, you know, sometimes it's not just a one-time thing. Part of the strength of what has made this strong at our TCU is that we have recurring sessions each month. So if you do have like an instructional design team or folks that are centered on professional development, right? Or even connecting with division heads and coming up with like a game plan. I think there is a lot of strength doing it in-house, but especially if you guys have questions, I would be definitely willing to help you with that process or help with the onboarding. But I do know what you're talking about because I'm one of those people situationally where I'm very open to ideas. And then sometimes I think I got my curriculum perfect, you know what I mean? And so this has been very helpful for me to reflect as well. And it's also something where everybody has a strength, right? And you can be as open as you want to be. That's actually one of our pillars when we start is it's about strength. It's about being vulnerable. And it's about we're going to focus on solutions rather than focus on deficits. So that's actually written in it. And that's also kind of how you can get in the weeds of stuff is focusing on all the things you can't do. So we focus on those positives. So we can
Thanks for sharing all the details in your program. How did you get the buy-in from leadership to do this? Because obviously it costs time. And then how did you get the buy-in from the faculty to attend? Was it a you should, you must?
That's a really good question. That's a very good question. So my role at the college is half faculty and half instructional design. So as instructional designer, part of the goal is PD. So that was kind of already put into my role. So having like that person to kind of be the representative for it, and Chrissy at the time, my colleague, right? That was very helpful. As far as the buy-in component, the folks who had done the course observations, the data is already there. And you guys all have data just like this, right? Some of you, I'm guessing some of you probably have really similar areas you need to improve on as far as when you're looking at the course observation data as a whole. And I also know that because those are themes that that the College Fund and AHEC have shared with us across TCUs, right? So a lot of times if the data is leading that way, those are things that the administration already wants, right? The other benefit that I've seen at our TCU is that we do this in-house, right? And we have folks that can give insights because they're professionals in their area, in their area of strength, right? So it also saves the college money when you compare having someone come in and do it as well. But it is completely voluntary. I did follow up with everyone individually to see what their areas of strength were. There can be a little bit of, well, hey, what's this up? Why am I doing this? It's all self-reporting. You're not saying any of the scores that you're doing. So that was helpful. It's very low stakes in that way. I wish that they were better attended because we do have, sometimes we'll have, oh my gosh, like we've had like 18 people there before and we have a pretty small TCU. And then other times we'll have 8 people. So it's voluntary, right? But we've had getting people to kind of establish that community. It's very handy and we do it kind of after lunch break. So yeah, those are some positive things. And then I do recommend, right, if you're in person, if you can get a budget to have like some pizza or just a little bit of food or a $5 gift card to like local coffee shop, right? Those are great things. So we've done that as well. Yeah, that was that was right next to our campus, just to be clear. We're not like balling out in all these places. So yeah. Mhm. Mhm. Right. Yeah. Yeah, if you guys have, if any of you are interested in developing something similar at your college or just kind of getting the ball started, it's really based on a self view of things, right? And so a lot of that is going to be how people present things, right? So the self view is like the self-reporting, low stakes and everything. But as far as that framework, it's similar to a personality test, right? And kind of getting to know each other. So but yeah, I would be very open to discussing that more. And you guys, please feel free to sign up with your information or my contact info is on here. I can pull that back up too. So, yeah.
Questions? Okay. Going once, going twice. Okay, well, we're going to wrap this up here. I just wanted to share something. Thank you, Megan, for that information. I'm going to take a lot of this back. I learned a lot today from this. And when I get back to St. Iglesias University next week, our faculty council, we did something similar to this, but not this well planned. We've been waiting for leadership and administration to set up one of these, we've been waiting for a long time, at the end of the semester. So the faculty council just said, let's do it by ourselves. So we're doing an end of the semester wrap up kind of after action report next week, bringing all faculty in. Potluck, you said food, we're gonna do potluck, and we're just gonna say, what went right last semester, maybe what went wrong, and share best practices, amongst the faculty. And because we have some new faculty that came in and we don't have much of an onboarding, program. So there's been a lot of faculty coming up and saying, what happens if my students don't turn in assignments? What if they, why don't they look at me in class, and so this type of program is perfect for that, and just do that, I don't know, every 2 years maybe, or at the end of the year. So great stuff. Thank you, Megan. And